Disturbing new details tonight in connection with a 3-year-old girl's reported disappearance in Newcastle County, Delaware. Her mother is now charged in connection with her death.
Nola Dinkins, a 3-year-old girl from Newark, Delaware, vanished without a trace on a warm evening in early summer 2025. It happened so quickly that no one had time to react. Her mother, Darrian Randle, told police that an armed man suddenly appeared, grabbed her daughter off the street, and within seconds, threw the child into a dark-colored SUV that sped off into the night. The story was horrifying, the kind of nightmare every parent fears, and it rocked the entire community. An AMBER alert was issued immediately. Police scoured every street, alley, and wooded area around Newark. Radio and TV stations interrupted programming. Social media exploded with Nola's image, a bright-eyed toddler with curly hair whose face now symbolized urgency and fear. Everyone clung to the same fragile hope, that she was still alive, and that the person who took her would soon be exposed. But then, as the investigation progressed, something began to feel off. The mother's account, frantic and emotional, didn't line up with the evidence. Surveillance footage showed no sign of any SUV in the area at the time she claimed. Witnesses reported hearing nothing, no screams, no screeching tires, just silence. And then came the subtle signs, faint but haunting. A timeline that didn't quite add up, statements that shifted under pressure, discrepancies that couldn't be ignored. And slowly, a darker possibility began to surface. What if there was no kidnapper at all? This was no longer the story of a child taken by a stranger. It was something else entirely. A labyrinth of contradictions, silence, and unthinkable implications. As investigators dug deeper, each clue seemed to peel away another layer of a disturbing truth. And what emerged wasn't just shocking, it was devastating. Because behind the panic, behind the press conferences and search parties, lay a question no one wanted to ask. Who really made Nola disappear? And why? On the night of June 10th, 2025, at around 8:30 p.m., the Newcastle County Police Department in Delaware received a frantic 911 call from a woman named Darrian Randle. Her voice was panicked, breathless, and filled with urgency. She reported that her 3-year-old daughter, Nola Dinkins, had just been kidnapped while the two were out walking along Gender Road, a quiet residential street in Newark. According to Darrian's initial statement, a tall white man wearing a mask and armed with a gun had suddenly jumped out of the darkness, threatened her, snatched Nola from her side, and sped away in a dark-colored SUV waiting by the curb, vanishing into the night like a storm. Police launched an emergency response immediately. Within just 45 minutes, an Amber Alert was activated and broadcast across the entire state of Delaware and into neighboring states including Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. The alert described the suspect as an armed white male driving a black or gray SUV with an unknown license plate, possibly heading south. Nola Dinkins' photo was plastered across highway billboards, mobile alert apps, and local television stations. Checkpoints were set up along major highways. The Newark Police Department, the Delaware State Police, the FBI, and even federal highway patrol units all joined the massive effort to find her. At a press conference the next morning on June 11th, Lieutenant Daniel Seligman of the Newcastle County Police shared more details from Darrian's initial testimony. She told us that a white male with a firearm emerged from behind a bush, threatened both her and her child, and then quickly abducted Nola, forcing her into a dark-colored SUV and fleeing westbound, Seligman said. He emphasized that the case was being treated as a high-risk armed child abduction. The entire state of Delaware was on edge. Morning news programs cleared their schedules to focus entirely on the search for Nola. Local churches held overnight prayer vigils. A search fund was set up within hours and received hundreds of donations in no time. To the public, this had become a race against time, where every second could mean the difference between life and death for a 3-year-old girl. As soon as the Amber Alert was issued, investigators from the Newcastle County Police Department began to scrutinize every detail of Darrian Randle's account. They reviewed surveillance footage from across Gender Road, the very street where Darrian claimed the abduction took place. Every dark-colored SUV that passed through the area during that time frame was checked and cross-referenced, but nothing matched. No vehicle stopped. No white male was seen. And most importantly, there was no sign of a young girl being forced into any car. Meanwhile, a separate team of detectives was dispatched to the apartment of Cedric Britton, Darrian's current boyfriend, whom she had insisted was not involved in the case. But the cameras in that area told a different story. On the evening of June 9th, just one day before the disappearance was reported, Darrian had visited Cedric's residence. However, surveillance footage showed that she arrived alone. Nola was nowhere to be seen. That was the moment detectives began to doubt her story. If Darrian had claimed her daughter was still with her that evening, why was there no evidence of the child's presence? The deeper they dug, the more disturbing the inconsistencies became. Police examined Darrian's gray Ford Explorer, the same vehicle she had used in the 2 days leading up to the missing persons report. The moment they opened the door, they were hit with an overpowering smell of industrial-strength cleaner, as if someone had just tried to scrub away something they didn't want found. In the back seat, an old blanket was stained, and the blood had soaked deep into the fabric. In the cargo area, officers found strange wet patches and several strands of hair that matched Nola's DNA. These weren't circumstantial signs anymore. They were clear evidence, unmistakable indicators of an attempt to cover up something horrific. On the evening of June 11th, less than 48 hours after Nola was reported missing, a Maryland search team was dispatched based on newly developed intelligence. Their destination, Perryville Park in Cecil County, roughly 30 miles from Newark. There, in a remote wooded area far from the main paths, they discovered a dark blue suitcase. When they opened it, what they found left even seasoned detectives shaken. Inside was the lifeless body of a young girl, wrapped tightly in a blanket, her skin cold and mottled with bruises. Many officers turned away in silence. The pajamas, the height, the hair, everything matched the AMBER alert description of Nola Dinkins. By the early hours of June 12th, the police department officially canceled the AMBER alert. There was no kidnapper, no white man with a gun, no mysterious SUV that ever existed. It had all been a fabricated story, constructed by the one person who should have done everything to protect Nola, her own mother. When faced with the irrefutable evidence and the forensic confirmation that the body found in Perryville was indeed Nola Dinkins, Darrian Randle finally broke down. During a multi-hour interrogation at the New Castle County Police Department headquarters, she confessed to something so chilling it left even veteran investigators shaken. According to Darrian's own admission and court documents released by Delaware authorities, the tragedy unfolded on the morning of June 9, 2025. One day before she reported the so-called armed abduction. That morning, Darrian claimed she lost control after Nola had wet the bed. In what she described as a fit of rage, she grabbed a belt and struck her 3-year-old daughter between 15 and 20 times. The blows were so severe that they caused significant trauma to Nola's small body, especially to her head and back. Nola died on the spot inside the home they shared. No 911 call was made, no CPR, no cry for help. The first thing Darrian did after realizing her daughter was dead was call her boyfriend, Cedric Antoine Britton. Investigators later confirmed she summoned him to the house, and according to the official case report, the two were described as panicked, frightened, unsure what to do next. But what came next was anything but accidental. They didn't call police. They didn't notify emergency services. They made a choice to cover it up. Cedric helped Darrian place Nola's lifeless body into the trunk of her gray Ford Explorer, wrapped in a thin blanket. That night, the pair drove aimlessly around the Newark area. There seemed to be no clear destination. Perhaps they were searching for a place to dispose of the body. Or maybe they were hoping, irrationally, to stumble upon a less guilty solution. In the end, they returned to Cedric's residence and stashed the suitcase containing Nola's remains in the basement overnight. The next morning, June 10th, Darrian woke up early, put on makeup as if nothing had happened, and walked into a police station to report her daughter had been kidnapped. She described a white man with a gun, a dark SUV, and insisted she had been directly threatened on Gender Road. In her official statement, she even claimed to have screamed for help, but was too scared to chase after them. Every detail was crafted like a Hollywood screenplay, and it was that very perfection, so carefully staged, that made investigators start to question her story. In a second interrogation following the discovery of Nola's body, Darrian finally admitted, "I made up the kidnapping because I didn't want Cedric to get in trouble." The room went silent. She didn't express remorse. She didn't cry for her daughter. Her first concern was for her boyfriend. After confessing, Darrian was transferred to a Delaware detention facility and charged with first-degree murder, felony child abuse resulting in death, and filing a false police report. Cedric Britton was arrested in Maryland and charged with aiding in the concealment of a corpse and failure to report a death. What the world had believed to be a child abduction had unraveled into a grim domestic tragedy, one where the perpetrator was the very person meant to protect the child, and where the truth was stitched together with blood, silence, and an exquisitely constructed lie. In the days following the harrowing confession, authorities officially released the identities and charges of the two central figures in the case. Darrian Randle, 31, a resident of Newark, Delaware, the biological mother of Nola and the person who falsely reported the abduction, was now facing the full weight of the law. The second individual was Cedric Antoine Britton, 44, Darrian's current boyfriend, who lived in Northeast Maryland. He was believed to have helped her handle the child's remains after her death. According to the indictment filed by the Delaware Attorney General's office, Darrian Randle was charged with a series of severe offenses, including murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree, felony child abuse resulting in death, abuse of a corpse, obstruction of justice, and filing a false report to law enforcement. Under Delaware law, first-degree murder is punishable by life imprisonment without the possibility of parole if convicted, a charge made even more serious due to the victim's age and the intentional nature of the crime. As for Cedric Britton, although he was not the one who directly caused Nola's death, he faced multiple felony charges of his own: conspiracy to commit murder, failure to report the death of a child, hindering a criminal investigation, and abuse of a corpse. In the eyes of the law, knowingly assisting after a crime, especially by concealing a body and failing to notify authorities, constitutes active complicity. At the time of her arrest, Darrian Randle was being held at the Baylor Women's Correctional Institution in Newcastle County, with bail set at $1 million. She was prohibited from contacting any minors and barred from leaving the state. Cedric Britton was detained at the Cecil County Detention Center in Maryland, with a lower bail of $75,000 and a condition of electronic monitoring if released. Lieutenant Seligman, spokesperson for the Newcastle County Police Department, stated, "While we've taken the first steps toward uncovering the truth, our investigation remains ongoing. We are committed to ensuring that everyone responsible for Nola's death is held fully accountable." He also urged the public to continue coming forward with information, particularly anyone who may have seen either suspect on June 9th or 10th, or noticed any unusual behavior during that period. In subsequent press briefings, officials emphasized that this was not just an isolated incident, but a chilling reminder that domestic violence, especially violence targeting children, can occur in even the most seemingly peaceful communities. They pledged not to rest until justice is done, not only for Nola, but for every voiceless child who suffers in silence. What investigators gathered from the scene and physical evidence was no longer a collection of random signs or panic-driven actions. It was a chain of deliberate steps that pointed to one undeniable conclusion. This was not an accident. This was a calculated crime. From the moment Darrian Randle chose not to call for medical help for her daughter, to the methodical scrubbing of her car with harsh cleaning agents, to stuffing the child's body into a suitcase, driving dozens of miles to dispose of it, and then returning home to craft a detailed kidnapping story. Every action reflected a distorted, morally broken, yet consciously devised plan. The blood-soaked blanket, the overwhelming chemical smell, the 24-hour delay before contacting police, all of it formed a pattern of intentional concealment, not an impulsive outburst. The deeper, more painful question is this: How does a mother bring herself to beat and kill her own child? In her statement, Darrian claimed she lost control after Nola wet the bed. But can a moment of anger truly escalate into dozens of belt strikes delivered until the child stopped breathing? Or does this point to something far more disturbing, a prolonged pattern of abuse, slowly escalating over time? The question isn't just why, but since when? And during all that time, where were the people who could have stepped in? Family members, neighbors, child protection services. Darrian's case echoes one of the most notorious tragedies in American criminal history, the Susan Smith case in 1994. Smith fabricated a story about a black man abducting her 2 sons in South Carolina, when in fact she had driven her car into a lake, drowning both boys. More recently, in Delaware, the case of Emma Grace Cole made headlines after the young girl was beaten to death and her body left behind a backyard baseball field. In each of these cases, the common thread is chilling. The perpetrator was the very person expected to protect. And in each case, the killer exploited society's sympathy, and at times racial bias, to mislead justice. This was not just the crime of one individual. It was the failure of an entire system. A system that overlooked warning signs of domestic abuse, that accepted lies without scrutiny simply because the storyteller seemed normal. If we as a society refuse to question, refuse to intervene, then every Nola, every Emma, every forgotten child will never have the chance to be protected in time. The legal proceedings in the case of Nola Dinkins unfolded like a legal firestorm, beginning with what appeared to be a routine false report that might warrant a fine, but quickly escalating into one of Delaware's most serious criminal investigations of 2025. From the moment Darrian Randle walked into the police station on 2025 June 10th, claiming an armed abduction, to the discovery of Nola's body in a suitcase in Perryville and the subsequent confession, the justice process moved at an accelerated pace. Investigators, prosecutors, and the courts worked in close coordination to ensure that justice would not be delayed, not even for an hour. Once arrested, Darrian faced a long list of felony charges, the most serious being first-degree murder. Under Delaware criminal law, this charge can carry a sentence of life imprisonment without parole, particularly when the victim is a child and the act is proven to be intentional and cruel. She was also charged with second-degree murder, carrying a minimum sentence of 15 years, as well as felony child abuse resulting in death, obstruction of justice, abuse of a corpse, and knowingly filing a false police report. Cedric Britton, Darrian's boyfriend, though not the direct cause of death, was also charged as an accessory after the fact under Maryland and federal law, facing a possible sentence of 10 to 25 years if convicted. Another legal issue drawing public scrutiny is the use and misuse of the AMBER alert system. Designed to trigger a rapid response to child abductions, the system was activated based on Darrian's fabricated story, causing a massive deployment of public resources, widespread panic in the community, and damage to the credibility of a tool meant to save lives. Legal experts across the country are now calling for reforms to the alert verification process, including requiring preliminary evidence or implementing a minimum review period before broad broadcasting. But more than anything, the case of little Nola represents something far beyond criminal statutes. It stands as a powerful reminder: every citizen, from neighbors, teachers, to healthcare workers, has both a moral and legal responsibility to protect children. When a mother can murder her own daughter without anyone noticing, it reveals a terrifying level of collective neglect. And for that reason, responsibility does not lie with the law alone. It lies with all of us. The case of Nola Dinkins is not merely a personal tragedy, it is a wake-up call for all of society. We must not, and cannot, tolerate any form of child abuse, whether it unfolds silently behind closed doors or is disguised by carefully crafted lies. The death of a 3-year-old child cannot be dismissed as a family accident, nor can it be buried beneath a fabricated sob story designed to manipulate the community's trust. Even more disturbing is how this case revives the haunting memory of the 1994 Susan Smith tragedy, a white mother who drowned her 2 sons in a car and then claimed they were kidnapped by a black man. In a bitter twist, Darrian Randle, a black woman, invented a story about an armed white kidnapper. And with that, the narrative turned painfully ironic. Her lies didn't just waste critical search resources, they deepened the cracks of racial tension, reinforced dangerous stereotypes, and eroded the fragile trust between communities. When a perpetrator exploits the very system built to protect victims, the core values of justice themselves are put at risk of distortion. Now more than ever, we must confront the uncomfortable truths. Domestic violence knows no boundaries of class, race, or neighborhood. It can happen in homes that appear stable, by individuals who seem ordinary, even respectable. That's why every one of us, whether neighbor, teacher, healthcare worker, or friend, must learn to recognize the signs of abuse. Unexplained bruises, extreme fear in a child, controlled or silenced speech, and more importantly, we must find the courage to speak up. We must continue to place our faith in the law, in journalists who dare to uncover uncomfortable truths, in social organizations that tirelessly fight for the rights of children and women. But faith means nothing without action. Action means investing in emotional education, providing mental health support for parents, building early detection networks for abuse, and enforcing laws that are strict but just. We cannot wait until a child's body is found in a suitcase in the middle of a forest to ask, why didn't anyone stop this sooner? Motherhood, the most sacred bond a human can feel, should be the final refuge, the safest place a child can ever know. In the eyes of a 3-year-old like Nola, a mother isn't just a caregiver, she is the whole world. But for Darrian Randle, that sacred bond was shattered by her own hands. Since the day this case broke, the question haunting everyone hasn't been, how did she hide it? But, how could a mother do that to her own child? Maybe it was the buildup of stress, poverty, isolation, or untreated mental illness. Maybe it was a lack of parenting skills, or the cruel echo of a cycle of abuse she herself had endured in childhood. But whatever the cause, nothing, absolutely nothing, can justify beating a child to death and then fabricating a lie to cover it up. When love turns into control, when responsibility becomes burden, and when a mother stops seeing her child as a human life in need of protection, and instead sees them as a problem to be erased, that is when motherhood ceases to exist. It is suffocated by the very hands that should have been holding that child close. No one is born ready to be a parent. But society has a responsibility not just to punish the crime. It must also learn to recognize the early cracks in the foundation of family relationships, the silent spaces where children like Nola grow up unheard. Because the most painful part of this tragedy isn't the death. It's the truth that the person who ended her life was the very one who was supposed to love her without condition. If you believe in justice for Nola, and for the millions of children suffering in silence, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Every share is an act of defiance against silence. Every voice is a promise that no child will be left alone in the dark.